Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This regular meeting of the Township Council is being held in accordance with the scheduled meetings of the Township Council, established and adopted by the Township Council, which schedule designates the time, date, and place of this meeting. Adequate public notice of this meeting has been provided pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. We are using an electronic amplifying recording device in order to obtain a clear and audible record, and we request all those wishing to speak be recognized and state your name and address directly into the microphone. The recording device will be so utilized by the Township Clerk's Office for the preparation of minutes. It shall be the official record of the Township Council meeting. Madam Clerk, may I have the roll call, please?
Mr. Hutchison.
He is on vacation.
Ms. Grace. Here. Mr. O'Neill.
He is delayed due to the weather.
Mrs. Studd. Present. Mr. Brenner. Here. Mrs. Strato. Here. Mr. Mercado.
Present.
Mr. Parliament.
Here.
Mr. Cardis.
Here.
Mr. Lack.
Here.
Deputy Chief Manasseh.
Here.
Mr. Tazel.
Here. When I have the first public portion, this is for agenda items only. Anyone addressing council may speak one time. Each speaker is allocated up to 3 minutes, and the total public portion time is 15 minutes. Would anyone like to speak? Yes, sir. Mr. Burr.
Good evening, Council. Brian Burns, 5 Slowwood Drive, Ariel. I saw on the agenda this evening information on the Roseland Bridge with an amendment. I believe, from what I read, it changes the language to accept the Office of Natural Resource Restoration funding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we are at the point now that we have all the money coming in.
I had an agreement that I reviewed before the meeting, and then once we pass the resolution, that resolution will be signed along with Mr. Carlemere and the mayor to move forward on that.
Wonderful. It's great news for the township. I'm more than willing to take anybody who want to tour the property once it's closed on. If you want to put up green acre signs, we can mark trails on the property. Very good news. Thank you, Council.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Elizabeth Dugan, Blenheim.
Good evening.
Good evening. I saw a few resolutions regarding road work for this evening. Do you know what funding source will be used to pay for these things?
So the resolutions that you saw for road work, well, we had a council workshop at 6:30, and those streets were identified roads. Part of it was designed. There are certain improvements for that were earmarked, and that is coming out of our capital budget.
Okay. Debt, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone else? We'll close the first public portion. Waive the reading and accept the minutes of executive session June 14th, 2021, regular session June 14th, 2021, and regular session June 28th, 2021. Accept the motion.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace. Yes. Mrs. Stubbs. Yes, with the, must abstain for June 28th. Mrs. Brenner.
Yes, for the 14th and abstain from June 28th.
Mrs. Strato.
Yes, but I abstain from June 14th, the work regular meeting.
Mr. Mercado.
Yes to all. Next is the ordinance. We will have a second reading and there will be a public hearing on it. Ordinance 0-21-06 is ordinance of the Township of Gloucester, County of Camden, and State of New Jersey, amending ordinance 0-03-03, land development regarding plug-in electrical vehicle charging stations. What this does is it adds the following subsection to the ordinance for purpose intent. of plug-in electric vehicle charging stations, performance. It defines it, the permitted use throughout the town, and performance and design standards, and that is identified in the ordinance. Now open up the public hearing on this ordinance. Seeing none, close the public hearing. Okay.
Gentlemen, you got Blackwood. So according to drivegreennewjersey.gov, there's 2,103 total electrical vehicles in all of Camden County. 37 municipalities, that gives us about 57 vehicles. Why would we advocate or give any assets to 57 vehicles in a town of 65,000? And who's paying for it?
This is adding where it provides opportunities for residents. Have you taken a look at the
I
ordinance?
did, I read the whole thing.
You read the ordinance?
I did. I did. So it's still, on average, it's about 57 vehicles across every municipality in Camden County.
Zoning. Mr. Lechner, anything you want to add to that?
Yes, this ordinance amends the land development ordinance. Basically, it allows electrical vehicle charging stations on residential properties. And electrical vehicle charging stations as an accessory use to existing commercial, industrial sites, as long as they use their existing parking areas. In other words, commercial development normally would have to go before the planning board. So if an existing facility such as Target or Lowe's wanted to add electrical vehicle charging stations on their existing parking areas, they would not have to go to the planning board to do that. They could apply for a zoning permit and convert some of their existing parking spaces into spaces for electrical charging vehicles. I don't see any expense really to the town. This is coming from the Mayor's Energy Committee, this and the next ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Lechner.
So that doesn't really speak to what I'm saying. So it's fine if they don't have to, if they can go, they don't have to go in front of the zoning board. That's fine, they can get a normal permit. For new construction, we have vacant buildings all up and down all of our main streets, and we're not doing a very good job of bringing businesses in. Being more restrictive, Mr. Lecter, they're going to require, if you have more than, according to the ordinance the way I read it, they're going to require having, if you have 100 parking spaces for every 100, you're going to be required to have one charging station for every 50 cars, or for every spaces, and one of those spaces be allocated through that. So what it looks like is that we're just then being more restrictive on businesses, and if we're going to try and entice businesses to come into town, how are we going to do that? By making it more restrictive, giving them more red tape. I mean, you're talking about, hiring engineers, and are we doing anything in town on public properties, on municipal properties with these? Are we going to adhere to the same standards?
Is that something that yes, Mr. Lechner?
Again, I'm not involved with this particular aspect of it, but I know the Energy Committee, along with Public Works, has looked at various sites throughout the town where we could accommodate these spaces for township's residents, like Gloucester Township Community Park on Hickstown Road. I know that's one of the locations, and there's a few others.
Ken, if there's an existing property, let's say Shops at Cross Keys, would they have to adhere to this particular ordinance and install, or are they grandfathered in?
No, they're grandfathered in. The gentleman is correct. There's one section in the ordinance that requires parking. This is one of the requirements from Sustainable Gold, New Jersey, which the town's trying to achieve. Certification for Sustainable Gold. There is a provision in there of a couple of spaces for new development if you're going to provide at least 100 parking spaces, but it doesn't really define, like the level 1 charging station is something that you could plug into at your home.
Okay.
So it's not a large expense.
Yeah, 520. Okay, thank you.
So that said, if we're going to be adding it for the town, and we're a town that self-insures, and we have people that are going to go in and be charging their batteries for these things are about 30,000. So if we're going to have supercharging stations or regular charging stations, why would the town put out any of these things for 57 vehicles, assume any liability, and put ourselves out there and incur the expense? And who's paying for the actual electric that's being used? Because we're not putting gas stations out in the middle of the parking lot for everybody to fill up a gas tank for free. But we're accommodating electric vehicles, which people already have electric charging stations in their own homes, where they wouldn't have an electric vehicle. It's something that they took on when they did this. I don't understand why we as a town would, if we wanted to partner with Wawa or we wanted to partner with Royal Farms and as a contingency when they're going to come into our town, perhaps, okay, then we'll say, hey, can you give us a couple charging stations? And we could accommodate it that way. But on the municipal level, for us to pay to charge other people's vehicles, and again, since we self-insure, assume that liability, it seems like it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And for people that want to come in and want to bring their businesses here, hopefully one day, being more restrictive and having more permits that they have to pull and piping, they may have to do service changes on these things to accommodate superchargers because the panels may not be sized properly and so on and so forth. It's a large expense that we're asking incoming businesses to take on for no reason whatsoever, because people should be responsible to charge their own vehicles. And, and if there's a place and a time like, with Wawa or, another thing that where people typically go and get, gas, it would make sense. But for us as a township to put ourselves out there doesn't make any sense. And I urge you guys not to pass this. There's ways to do things, but putting ourselves at bay or especially since we self-insure, it doesn't make any sense.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes, Mr. Krug.
Evening, Council. Paul Krug, Blackwood Estates. Some interesting discussion points there. I guess number one, with regards to, at least on township property, I don't think the taxpayer, and correct me if I'm wrong, would flip the bill for that. Most of what I've seen is you get charged per kilowatt hour. So I assume that those who would be using it on township property would be paying per kilowatt hour for the electricity they consume. Would that be correct?
I couldn't answer that, Mr. Carl Mayor. I can't give you kilowatts or what they're going to consume.
I would sense, because they just one through that that's probably how it's set up. Everybody utilizing that service would be paying for that.
Right. Okay. And then I guess, if Target or Lowe's, which were the examples given, has interest in doing that, I'm assuming maybe that's what precipitated this conversation or this zoning. I assume they would go out to a consultant or contractor like Electrify America to bring in the expertise for the installation and maybe profit share. So it would be in their interest to put this on their property. Is that what precipitated this conversation? Do we have a company or entity interested in installing this?
I know this is part of the Mayor's Green Initiative and his Energy Commission. I'm not sure what precipitated that, other than green initiatives throughout the township. Mr. Lecter, is there anything else you would like to add to that?
You don't have to, Ken.
No?
You're correct.
Okay.
It's through the Energy Committee and Sustainable New Jersey Gold Certification. These are one of the items
Initiatives.
recommended. You get so many points for different.
Did someone come to the mayor? Do you know? I mean, do we have interest in this being installed from our businesses?
The town has Blue Sky Power, who's our energy consultant. I believe it came through that, and the Mayor's Energy Committee. I would have to ask you to contact Blue Sky Power or the Mayor's office.
Okay.
I mean, if you want to get into the nitty-gritty.
Does this ordinance specify level 2, level 3 chargers and
Yeah.
kilowatts that they put out and all of that?
Yes.
Okay. With regard to the final stipulation on 100 parking spaces, I think I have to be in agreement, if that is the stipulation, with Mr. D'Amico, in that I'm not sure that should be a stipulation put onto developers or businesses coming into the township. So I would ask that you review that particular stipulation, maybe remove it. Because like I said, I think what's going to happen here is Lowe's or Target is going to go out to and Electrify America and do some type of profit sharing where it makes sense because they have so many unutilized parking spots that they're going to want to profit off of those spots. So I don't think we need to put the angst onto businesses wanting to come into the township to do this. I think the companies who want to do it will do it because it'll be profitable for them to offer the service. So once again, ask you to potentially remove that stipulation for our businesses. Thank you.
Thank
Can we, excuse me, I'm sorry, would that be an option to remove that stipulation for new businesses, or is it following the guidelines directly for our clean energy?
That, or where does that number come from?
I apologize, I'm not going to be able to completely answer your question, and I'd have to defer to the Blue Sky Power Energy. They're the ones that are coordinating through the requirements of Sustainable New Jersey Gold. I do believe it may be a requirement that the town is from Sustainable New Jersey Gold, but I'm not 100% positive. It's in there for a reason, and that's probably why it was a recommendation from them.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Burns.
This is a very interesting conversation. It seems like there's a lot of gray fuzzy areas here. Those members of council who haven't spoken up, if you really don't know a whole lot about this, I would strongly urge you to table this motion, this decision, until more information can be gathered. There's nothing wrong with tabling it. There's another meeting in 2 weeks. We get some of these answers, resolved. It's a smart thing to do if you don't know. Let's not make a decision on something you're not sure about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Mr. Polidoro.
Good evening, Council. Ray Polidor from the Historic Village of Ariel. Mr. Burns stole my thunder. Ordinarily, it seems like the administration hands down some things that the council doesn't quite understand and vote moves forward. But it's apparently clear that the administration's not certain with their answers, as well as council voting on something that there's not a lot of knowledge on. And I also would request that council table this. It's better to be sure than to vote on something just because. And this does not have it's not a time-sensitive issue. It's not going to go anywhere. And it'd be great if you guys could table this and review it, know a whole lot more about it before you call that vote tonight. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Close the public hearing. I entertain a motion.
I would like to can I make a motion to table it since it's not under a time crunch? I think some good questions were brought up that I'd like to look into.
Is that a second?
That's second.
Take a motion to table. Madam Clerk, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mrs. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mrs. Strada?
Yes.
Mr. Mercado?
No to table. No, that has been tabled. Ordinance second reading, 0-21-07. Ordinance of the Township of Gloucester, County of Camden, State of New Jersey, amending ordinance 0-03-03, land development regarding solar energy. This, as the following subsection, Title 428, solar energy, to discuss the purpose and intent of solar energy to township residents for residential, commercial, industrial, office, and institutional entities, about performance, permitted uses for solar energy systems, solar energy facilities, and the development review process, and fees. We'll now open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Anyone wish to speak on this? Seeing none, close the public hearing. I entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion. Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Mrs. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Winters?
Yes.
Mrs. Strada?
Yes.
Mr. Mercado?
Yes. Next, we have our resolutions consent agenda. Any council member would like to remove any item on the consent agenda, please speak up. Hearing none, I entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented. Thank you, Mrs. Winters. Thank you, Mrs. Strato. On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mrs. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato?
Yes.
Mr. Mercado?
Yes. And last, on our regular agenda is Resolution 2107-221, resolution authorizing the signing of amended Green Acres project agreement between the Township of Gloucester and the State of New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection Green Acres Program for Rosalind Bridge, property located at 2650 Ariel Road, Block 14601, lots 2, 5, 6, and 13. I entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
On the question, roll call, please.
Ms. Grace? Yes. Mrs. Stubbs?
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard?
Yes.
Mrs. Strato?
Yes.
Mr. Mercado?
Yes, we did receive a few GTE Gov access emails. The first from Peter Heimball, Morningstar Court. Does there exist a project budget for the $4.4 million Green Acres project that is referenced in resolution number 221? How can one obtain this budget? Mr. Cars had, at the time that this email came in, we can obtain it, but this request came in at 4:56. DEP offices were closed. They could not provide us a budget breakdown at that time. We'll try to access this information for Mr. Heimball tomorrow. Next, from Peter Heimball, again, for Morningstar Court. Can you please tell me where one can find the public meeting schedule for the Gloucester Township Economic Development Corporation? The Gloucester Township Economic Development Corporation meets on the second Thursday of each month at 8:30 a.m. in the mayor's office. And I could provide Mr. Heimball additional information if he would like that. And our last GT access emails from Samuel Sweet, 18 Elizabeth Place in Ariel. It was recently reported by the Gloucester, I'm reading it as it was written. It was recently reported by Gloucester Township that the small business grant was running out of money. The program had over $400,000 in it. As of the last meeting, only 23 companies were approved. At the most, that is $115,000. Has that number of approved applications increased that high in the past 2 weeks? Can you please provide updated numbers on this program? How many companies have applied? How many companies have been approved? How many have been denied? If so, what are the reasons? How many are in review? 5, can you provide an updated list of the companies that were approved and received funds? Finally, is the fee paid to Triad that was out of the actual funds a fixed fee or is it based on time? First, that the small business grant is running out of money is not true. I'm not sure where Mr. Sweet received that information. The number of approved applications, have they increased it high in the past 2 weeks? No, we have more to approve on the bill list for the July 26th meeting. Can you provide updated numbers? I provided this to Mr. Sweet at the last meeting and gave him a copy, but I will again read this out loud. We have received 97 applications as of July 9th. 30 of them were rejected. 67 applications were approved or invited to apply, pre-apps. Full applications were received. There's 31 of them. There are 3 applications that are pending for more information. 28 applications have been approved by Triad. 8 applications are a pending award, or they're pending award from Township Council. And they'll be, Mr. Carter's correct on, well, some of them will be on our bill list. So applications awarded have been 20.
It's actually going to be
23 that you have here.
because on the 28th of June, the bill list.
So this is updated, okay.
Yes.
And there's a list of 23 businesses here that was provided to Mr. Sweet. And I can provide that, or Mr. Carson, I can ask you to send that.
That hasn't changed. That'll change after the next bill list.
And the last, the fee that's paid on Triad. Triad, they estimate that the total case management expense, including the pre and full application processing of an estimated 255 cases, with 85 of them to be approved, will be roughly $65,000, which is well within the fund's budget. So that concludes our eGov access emails. We'll now open up our second public portion. This is for any item that any member of the public would like to address council. Each member is allocated up to 5 minutes, and there's 30 minutes total for the public portion. And I ask those that are speaking to be cognizant of their time and their neighbors when their time is up to please wrap up their comments or questions. Anyone like to speak? Ms. Coyne.
Denise Coyne, Shoes Landing. Again, I asked this at council workshop and I wasn't able to get an answer. I would like to know if Mr. Lecter can please tell me why taxpayers paid for a study for the Village of Gloucester lots prior to, paid for the amended redevelopment plan prior to the study being completed for the lots.
Ms. Lecter, that was a question that Ms. Coyne asked at the workshop. I was unable to answer that question.
Could you repeat the question? Because I'm not sure I followed
Yes,
it.
the taxpayers paid to have the amended redevelopment plan worked on for the Village of Gloucester prior to the study for the lots being completed. So I'm wondering why the taxpayers paid for amended redevelopment plan without even knowing if the lots qualified as a redevelopment area, which come to find out they don't.
I'll try to answer.
Okay. You getting your steps in today, Mr. Lecter.
Pardon me?
You getting your steps in today.
First off, the question should probably be directed to the mayor's office. But all of Gloucester Township, I believe since in the 80s, was designated as an area that would be a rehabilitation area. I've expressed this on several occasions prior to this. So that allows all of Gloucester Township, because we are as a designated rehabilitation area, many areas could have a redevelopment plan, but they would not be entitled to have powers of eminent domain or a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes. There's already a redevelopment plan on the properties that encompass part of villages of Gloucester Township. Matter of fact, the redevelopment plan encompasses more lots than the lots that are studied. So with that said, I believe the intention is that we have an existing plan. We want to study the one block area, which is from Lakeland Road along the west side of the Black Horse Pike, bounded on Lakeland Road and bounded on, I think, Finelli Avenue. It's just north of Corsino. What was Corsino's? I'm not sure. I have the exact road. I'd have to look at the map. Bounded on the east by the Black Horse Pike and on the west by the Pike Path. So just one section of that was decided to be studied for a redevelopment area. And I would also emphasize that the plan that Mrs. Coyne is referencing is a draft study. And that's my answer. It's just one section of the redevelopment plan encompasses a large area. And the redevelopment study was just a section of the plan.
Ms. Coyne, does that answer your question?
No.
Stay there, Ms. Lecter.
I looked at the bills for the redevelopment plan and the redevelopment study, and they're almost exactly identical for the time spent on P&M addressing both the redevelopment plan and the Village of Gloucester, the 16 lots. So it seems to me that they were both being done concurrently at the same time. They were billing for the 16 lot study at the same time they were billing for the amended redevelopment plan. And it seems to me that logic and reasoning would dictate that how the study comes out would affect the overall plan. for the area. If the lot's qualified as a redevelopment zone or they don't, has to have an impact on the plan. So we spent thousands of dollars on a redevelopment amended plan for lots without knowing whether or not they even qualified. So I could see if if they were billing for something other than the Village of Gloucester, but they were billing for the Village of Gloucester. So I just don't understand how they could bill concurrently and plan for an amended redevelopment plan without knowing whether or not the lot's qualified. So that's my question. How can they amend the plan without knowing whether or not the lot's qualified?
Council President, I am not going to answer questions regarding the town's appointed redevelopment planners billing, number one. They can answer their own billing, which I've expressed before. The main, and I say that this, again, I'm going to repeat myself, and I apologize. One of the main things statutorily for a redevelopment area is determining whether or not it would qualify. If it did, it would qualify, would allow the town council and the mayor to allow people to qualify for a payment in lieu of taxes. It would also allow, if we wanted to designate these lots as a condemnation area. When we did the study, we identified that the lots would not be classified or would not be studied to be areas of condemnation. So we had to specifically identify that up front in the beginning of the study. So the town could still do a lot of planning analysis. Professional planning is what T&M Associates provides the town, regardless of the fact that it qualifies for a redevelopment area. I think it's apples and oranges. The two main components for redevelopment is condemnation, which we're not going to do, and the second one is whether or not the town would allow a long-term payment in lieu of taxes. As far as T&M's billing, they can answer their own billing.
Mrs. Coyne, is there anything else? I know the clock says 2:03, but you're going over your time, but is there anything else?
Yes, I would just like to know if there's ever been a stakeholder meeting that involved the community in any of these redevelopment areas that the township has done so far. And if so, have any of the stakeholders' meetings ever been advertised to the public, for the public to attend?
We've had Zoom meetings with T&M Associates, myself in the mayor's office, and the mayor. We've had Zoom meetings, but whether or not, and I did meet with T&M Associates representative and AP Construction, being they own a lot of the properties out there on site. We did a reconnaissance survey of the area. They're the only meetings that I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Coyne.
Can I make a statement, one last statement?
Well, you've gone over your time. If we have some more time, you can come back up. Mr. Polidoro.
Good evening again, Council. Ray Polidor from Ariel.
Good evening.
Start off with giving credit where credit's due. Thank you for tabling the ordinance and for listening to people and giving that an opportunity. The other question I have is, now that the COVID has toned down quite a bit and we're getting into a somewhat of a safer environment, will you be bringing back the invocation before the meeting? It's one of the things that our township has been spectacular in.
For those who attended the workshop, that was discussed, and I reached out to the ministerium, and most likely they'll be returning back in the fall.
Excellent. Thank you, and a credit to the township for doing that where other towns don't. I'll ask the question in the most basic manner that I can. I'll just keep firing through a couple questions to be done. The land deal between the Gloucester Township and the Housing Authority. It keeps on being discussed that it's illegal and nothing's going anywhere. Do we have any status on that, or is it just going to stay in limbo for a long time?
I don't have a status update, neither does Mr. Carter. Once we have a status update, I'll provide that to the individuals that ask that question frequently in our meeting.
Okay, and the consideration of making that land deal instead of for the multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars, the $1 that even council had thought might be a possibility. Have you guys had that discussion for anything to come about that would cost $1 and money would not be significant in that and save money that belongs in the Housing Authority Trust Fund?
Ray, that was one member of council that talked about $1. There's 7 members of council.
They represent, you still represent?
There was one member of council that talked about $1.
Okay,
And
and
talk about $1 and selling it for $1.
well, it was actually Mr. Carlemere that also had thought that may have been the situation at the time. I'm just interested in, being that one of your members did bring that up, is that something you had a discussion on?
No, we have not.
Okay, it might be a great idea because hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the Housing Authority Trust Fund compared to $1, it just seems like that money could be used for a better purpose for people that really could use the benefits of affordable housing rather than spending all that trust fund money on a piece of land that's going back and forth between 2 entities. It would help more people. I guess this question will go again to the Housing Authority. They shrugged their shoulders. You guys shrugged your shoulders somewhat when this question is asked. It seems pretty clear that the market to affordable program is obsolete. There's not going to be any turnout of that. You have money, once again, going out. The 2 entities, one of which is described as the director of that, the other being a consultant for that, still receives money. And the amount is insignificant. But the market to affordable, when we first talked about the idea, and Mr. Carlemere weighed in on that at the time, which was a great idea at the time, if it counted against our required numbers, which it doesn't anymore, I think the township legislative branch and the Housing Authority should get together, dissolve it. I think let those people go do something else, stop using up the money that is allotted for better things, and just put that to rest. It's useless, and there's no reason why it should still be on today. You're not going to turn out one house from the market to affordable project. Not one. 19 months later, not one. It's useless. It's time to get rid of that. I'd like to take an opportunity. I wasn't at the last meeting. I heard a comment being made by a councilperson at the closing of council, and I have a great deal of respect for that individual. It's our councilwoman, Miss Grace. And Miss Grace and Miss Shirley have done magnificent work on and on and on in Brittany Woods. There were other times when there were cleanups in the past, and I was with the organization that had done the cleanup back then, and there was a block party that followed. That was probably the last time that an organized cleanup had been done, as well as the everyday on and on and on that Miss Grace and Miss Shirley have done, and magnificent job that they have done. But to some extent, the comment that was made, I thought was inappropriate. Instead of politicizing and lambasting a group of people that came out to help, it would have been more appropriate to say thank you. They were there early in the morning. They helped clean up. They did a good job. There were others that showed up later. But doing the job and putting it out there to help anyone, regardless of what your opinion is of them, I think a thank you would have been more appropriate, and not to do something like that. Now, that'll be to your judgment, however you see fit to want to do that. But it's not the first time that the organization has been there to help in that development. And it probably won't be the last. And to some extent, it never hurts to say thank you to anybody. No one's too big to say thank you. And last, but certainly not least, one of those representatives that was there, or one of the people that were there, is a resident. And that invite went out, as it did the years ago that this had that they had participated. They were invited then, and they were invited this time. And I just think a thank you would be in order. And again, thank you for tabling that ordinance. And be looking forward to seeing the invitations come back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Polidoro. Is there anyone else? Mr. Burns?
Evening, Council, again, Brian Burns from Ariel. Last meeting, we talked about the Helen Hayes and Murray tracts of land. And Mr. Carlemere had indicated there was going to be a closed-door meeting at some point regarding those properties. Has that meeting taken place? Has it been scheduled?
Mr. Carlemere?
Not taking place, but there has been meetings with my office and the mayor's office as to the procedures to go forward, and I was involved in that also. Might not be appropriate for me to talk about it publicly, but there seems to be a movement in what you might consider the right direction.
Okay. If the meeting has not been scheduled, I am offering all members of council who are going to be involved with this decision to come out and see this piece of property. Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Mercado, Mr. Lecter all have my contact information. If I was council, I would like to see what I'm voting on. I have all the time in the world. I'm retired. Get my contact information from those three people. Let's get together. Let's go take a look at it. Now, you can't make decisions sitting here and not knowing fully what you're voting on. I have permission from the landowners to be on the site anytime I wish to be there. And if you want to go individually, whatever your schedule is, I will meet you and I will take you there and you can see for yourselves.
Mr. Burns, there are some people on council here that do have a relationship or do know the landowners and are familiar with the
Very
property.
good.
So that's an assumption on your part, they're not familiar with that particular area.
Okay.
One family's been here for many, many, many years and has been involved in through athletic organizations here in the town. I'm very familiar with that property. So, and I'm sure there are people here that know of that family as well. Some have taught the children in that family. So
Wonderful.
They're aware of that property.
I thank council again for the movement on Roseland Bridge. It's finally coming to the end. I was out today for half a day in the woods taking data logger measurements out of the Trout Street. And so far the data looks good. I've been involved 23 years. And it's an amazing, amazing place. Nothing else like it in all of southern New Jersey. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Is there anyone else? Mr. Krug.
Evening again, Council. Paul Krug, Blackwood Estates. As Ray said, got to give credit where credit is due. Thank you for tabling the electric charging stations to determine whether or not it would put a burden on our businesses so that we can be welcoming the businesses coming into the township. And to thank you, looks like Resolution 221 is progressing Mr. Burns' agenda, which I have agreed with in the past, and you've heard me in support of. So I thank you for that. With regard to Mr. Polidoro's question regarding the road to affordable housing, is he correct in stating that there has been no positive progression out of that program? And if so, who would be responsible for evaluating that and determining its effectiveness?
To date, there has not been a property that has gone through this program. That is a project with the Housing Authority. Ms. Grace had indicated at our workshop at 6:30 that the Housing Authority has a meeting tomorrow via Zoom. And I'm going to ask Ms. Grace to ask a couple questions on behalf of our council here regarding some things Housing Authority related. But Mr. Carmen, do you have anything to add to that?
Not other than, it's always been a difficult program. I know there's been a lot of studies done on the housing authorities. They have the charge with the responsibility of that. They have an individual there working with Triad. I know the individual is preparing reports to be submitted in for the study. And I would imagine, I don't know what his directions are, but looking into certain areas to see what can be identified and something that's not necessarily go out and acquire it, but that fits the program. So what stage they are in, probably be discussed at the housing authority.
Okay, understood, thank you. And yeah, Ms. Grace, if we can get additional details, I've heard Ray speak on it a number of times, just put up flags in my head as to number of months concurrently without, purchase, or just want to evaluate the effectiveness so we're spending our funds wisely. Moving on past that, just to speak to Denise's point on the one block property that Ken spoke to, which I'm very familiar with. I believe, and I'm not sure what the intent of the study is or implementation plan for that 1 square block area, but I'm fairly certain that all the property at this point has been purchased by Black Horse Properties, which is a subsidiary of AP Construction, or at least majority owners of AP Construction, which Corsino's, which Ken spoke to, has now become a construction industrial depot. So just interested in how that private property, what is the study going to recommend that, most of the 1 square block is owned by AP Construction. What are we going to recommend to private property owners?
I don't know, I haven't seen the study or draft of it, I don't participate in it. So I wouldn't know what that recommendation was. Sorry.
Is the study continuing to go on?
Mr. Lechner?
Yeah.
And so I guess AP Construction or the owners of Black Horse Properties would have to have a pretty big say in what is going to be developed there. They own all of the property except for Sapp's Produce Shack and Custard Shack. And I'll throw in a new business that came to town, Blair Mountain Biscuit Company, just opened next to the Custard Shack. If you'd like to visit, cheddar and rosemary biscuits with gravy for your breakfast.
Have you tried it yet?
I have.
I
I went.
Gloucester Shack last week. They had hiring. Have they opened yet?
They did a soft opening over the weekend. I live down the street, so I walked. There was a 45-minute wait, so I figured I'd let it die down a little bit. I'll go back and give it a try. But it's nice to see a business in there. But I mean, if AP Construction owns it all, or subsidiary of that, I mean, they're going to be the deciders, aren't they? Not T&M Associates. That T&M Associates isn't going to decide what they do with that property.
I would call it, well, they're a stakeholder. And I would imagine that any type of input from them would be considered and put in that particular study. When we talk about, last meeting, I talked about Blackwood West redevelopment, and when we, as a township, advocated for the lighting, streetscaping, sidewalk improvements, wayfinding signs, advocating for parking, that was all part of that particular redevelopment plan. So as we move forward with this particular study, those are certain things that I'm sure that Mr. Lechner, the administration, T&M, and stakeholders in that corridor would work together with moving forward. You want to add anything, Mr. Lechner?
This is all part of the planning process. In this particular case, we're planning through the local redevelopment housing law. Most of the township is planned under the municipal land use law through the power of zoning. Everybody's property has a zoning district that they probably didn't decide on. It was decided through the planning board and the planning process. So to answer your question, we can plan their property as part of what planning is. Master plan. Part of the master plan is the redevelopment areas that we've designated. It's all part of our master plan of the township, for planning out where we want to see commercial development, residential development, industrial, and so on. Yes, as the property owner, they decide whether or not they're going to do something or not do something, but we can still plan for how we want to see that particular property developed. through this particular, is through the local redevelopment housing law, where we will adopt a redevelopment plan. Outside of that, if you want to do something other than what it's zoned for, you have to go to the zoning board and get a use variance. That answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Leckman.
So A&P is playing ball with us, and we're in discussions with them, and have they hinted at a direction they'd like to go?
Well, the property is on a state highway, so it's earmarked for commercial development. I don't have all the information at my disposal right here, but I do believe initially when this whole project started out pre-pandemic, they may not have, AP Construction may not have owned all the property. I think when it first started out, when we awarded the project, the Corsino's was still operating, and some of the other businesses were operating. So they sort of, I think, acquired the properties that they've acquired, during the pandemic, and then which delayed some things. But lost my train of thought. I apologize. What was the
Are they playing ball?
Oh, do they have a vision? Oh, I wanted to mention that Lidl. We do have approved a Lidl store on the corner of Lakeland Road and the Black Horse Pike. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you. So that's something that's still, as far as I know, moving forward.
As long as it's still moving.
As far as I know, it's still moving forward.
Mr. Curry, thank you very much. Your time's up.
Thank you,
Is there
Council.
anyone else would like to speak? Ms. Corn, you'll be our last speaker of the evening.
T&M Associates submitted information for their RP for their appointment during the reorganization in January. And the documents that they submitted state that redevelopment plan preparation involves extensive stakeholder outreach, public meetings, and visiting sessions. An effective public participation process, including working with key stakeholders, is critical to the success of a project. Through stakeholder participation and public visioning meetings, opportunities and constraints facing the community are identified early in the process. So I just would like to know, when the community has a chance to say anything regarding these redevelopment areas. When does the community get to have a voice? Because from what I've seen, it seems that the only stakeholders I've been able to identify, seems how nobody can give me an answer who they are, is Dino and Amadeo from AP Construction and Mr. Lechner. And it seems to me like these redevelopment areas are going to have a huge impact on the community as a whole. And I just don't understand why the community doesn't get to have a voice, doesn't get to have a say.
So I agree with everything that Tina put in there, and the community should be part of that process, and they are stakeholders in that corridor. So I agree with what they put in there, and I'm agreeing with what you said. Mr. Lechner?
Yeah.
The community will have an opportunity to speak publicly at the planning board. The planning board, once this moves to that stage, there will be a public hearing. We will advertise for the public hearing, and we give individual notice to the property owners, and we give public notice at the public at large to the newspaper.
I'm aware of that process, Ken, but I think what Denise is saying is prior to that. Do they have any type of say in this particular study?
I would have to, it's a good question, and I can present that to the T&M Associates, whether or not the town wants to have a planning charrette to discuss it before we actually do a final draft of the redevelopment plan. But that's definitely a good question and a good, I'm all in favor of advocating municipal planning. I mean, that's my profession. If you want to speak to the administration, decide whether or not that's how they
I'll
want to present it.
follow with you in the mayor's office regarding that. Thank you.
And, I just wanted to correct Mr. Lechner as far as when AP Construction started buying up those properties. February 2012, they bought their first property, and they continued buying properties all the way up through, I believe, 2019. So they've been buying the properties for years. They own 10 of the 16 lots, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you. And that will close the public portion. Polling of directors.
Mr. Carter.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Carter.
Nothing to report.
Mr. Lechner.
Nothing to report.
Deputy Chief Nazari.
Nothing.
Mr. Chadwell. Ms. Grace.
Thanking everyone for coming out tonight. Safe travels home in the storm. Mr. Polidoro, when we have a second, 2 minutes before I leave, we'll talk about the difference between the Brittany Woods cleanup and Brittany Woods Community Action Group, which is a nonprofit, or in the process of being a nonprofit and founded in 2016. So I can explain that to you privately. But everyone have a good night.
Mrs. Stubbs. Thank you everyone for coming out. Have a great evening. Stay safe. Mrs. Leonard.
I want to thank everyone for coming out. Wish everyone safe travels home. Be careful with the storm. Mr. Burns, I just want to thank you for your commitment with the property, and the dedication that you have for that. Have a great night.
Mrs. Trotter.
Thank you all for coming out. Have a good night.
Mr. Mercado.
I want to thank everyone for coming out this evening. Thank you, Mr. Lechner, for your information and your help. Planning has had a lot of intricacies with it, and it requires some patience in dealing with particular projects, developers, and moving studies along and plans. So as I see Deputy Chief Nazari here, thank you for coming tonight. This Friday, July 16th in Veterans Park is the second movie night of our movie night series. I don't know what the movie is, but it starts at dusk. Dusk, I think dusk is on. But, starts at dusk, but there are games and activities that take place here, and it is a free event for our residents here or anyone to enjoy in Veterans Park. With that, I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
There's a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Have a great evening, everyone.
All right, all right.